Queen Charlotte actually exceeded my expectations. But then again, my expectations were in hell, so...
No way!
Queen Charlotte is a prequel to the Bridgerton show, and it basically tells the story about how Queen Charlotte met, married, and then fell in love with the Mad King George. So before we start, spoiler alert, I will be talking about the show in depth. So if you haven't watched the show, take this opportunity to click out the video and binge watch this show and then come back. I will be here waiting for you gracefully. Okay, now that they're done, so let's talk about what I did not like about the show, because yes, perfection is a myth. So there's always something to improve, and it's okay to like something and criticize it at the same time, as long as it is constructive criticism. As someone who is a sucker for romance, like I would not read a book if there's not a tiny bitty romance in it. I didn't like the fact that they tried so hard to make it seem like it's a love story, because in fact it's not. Here's why. They never touched upon the fact that Charlotte was manipulated into in a situation that she did not choose, and in a situation where she did not have all the answers. Like, her brother basically forced her to marry George. Like, let's talk about her brother for 1 second. That man, damn, who needs enemies when you have that kind of family? Like, who? This guy forced her into a wedding and then just disappeared. It was like, you know what, dear sis, just sit down tight, open your legs, and you'll be fine, and ciao, and you just left. Horrible. I was shocked. Like, her brother is a scumbag. Like, we don't talk about him enough, but damn. Let's not forget the fact that Charlotte was just 17. It's given pedophilia, it's given grammage. So I was a little bit baffled by the entire narrative where they tried to make it seem like it was okay for them to force her to marry this man, even if he was the king, without letting them know that he was actually suffering from a mental disease. Eventually, she actually chose to marry the king. Once Charlotte saw the king in that garden, bitch was like, you know, never mind, I'm gonna marry. I was like, girl. As soon as she saw a smile in that garden, she was like, I can't wait to be on my wedding night. She was like, never mind, I'm marrying afterward. George came with that smile and all the pennies dropped. All the pennies were just dropping. And I was like, damn, girl, keep focused, keep focused. Like, it took her basically nothing, absolutely nothing. Just be like, okay, I'm gonna marry him. That's how you know that she was pretty young, because she was only 17 at the time. And it doesn't change the fact that she was gonna be dealing with a husband that had a mental illness for the rest of his and her life, and she wasn't made aware of that, and she didn't have the opportunity to make that decision for herself and for her life, basically. There was actually this scene where she actually confronts the king's mother, so her mother-in-law, but I was expecting her to also have a scene where she actually confronts George and tell him, like, basically, bro, what is this? Why didn't you tell me this before? Because now I have to deal with this situation. But it never actually happened, which I kind of understand, but at the same time I just felt like the fact that that scene wasn't included is a little bit non-realistic. They basically treated her like a fool. Like, when she told him in that garden that she wanted to know everything, he should have started talking. He should have told her everything.
What do you want to know about me?
Everything.
Everything.
But instead, what did he do? He started rumbling about the fact that he didn't like fish and what he loved to do. Like, shit that nobody cares about. You know, that's how you know that he's a real man. Because men would tell you all the most useless shit that you never asked for, but conveniently forget to tell you that they're married with 5 kids. You know? Obviously, at the point of the story where she actually discovered that he was sick, she was actually deeply in love with him, so it wouldn't have changed anything at that time, I guess. But at the same time, at least I think that she should have had that conversation with him. She deserved to have that conversation, and not only with his mother, because he's not a kid, like, he's an actually grown-ass man. When you strip the story to its very core, this is a story of a teenage girl forced by her brother to marry a mentally unstable man without her consent. And yes, it's a matter of consent because, well, she consented to marry George when she saw his smile. She never consented to basically spend the rest of her life alone with a man that is there but not there, because the saddest part of the story is that George did not die early in his life. And I know it sounds morbid to be like, well, it's a bad thing that he did not die. It's actually like quite of a sad story, because since he did not die, like, he was there but at the same time he wasn't there. And the conversation that shows this aspect the most, it was the conversation between Lady Danbury and Lady Charlotte, when basically they were like, she's just frozen in time. Like, she can mourn her husband husband, King George, that she loves very much, but at the same time, like, she's mourning him because he's not there. Like, it was just such a messed up situation. And it was actually interesting to see how the showrunners used color between the past and the present. Like when you're in the past, like the colors are all like bright, it's sunny, is bright outside. You can really see that she's happy and it's really nice. But when you come back to the present with seasoned Queen Charlotte, the colors are still like pastel, but it's kind of like a cool dark undertone. The cool dark and grey undertone is brought about by the event of the very first episode, which is the death of the princess and her child. The death cast a gloomy and sad tone in the beginning of the season. This circumstance makes the viewer unsuspicious since the tonality matches the current narrative, which is the mourning period. However, what we observe is that the dark undertone doesn't change throughout the series and never matches the warm undertone of the past. This symbolizes that Queen Charlotte's story is not an happy one. The season starts with sadness and grief, and it subsequently ended in the same way. Even though the writer gave us a false idea of an happy ending with the announcement of an heir to the throne, Queen Charlotte's story is still relatively quite sad. Sometimes tonality, colors, and the choice of palette is a way to convey an underlying message about the character's journey. Second thing that wasn't sitting right with me was that great experiment shenanigan. Like, what the heck was that? Like, I still don't understand why the great experiment was necessary, what it was for. They introduced this idea that because George and Charlotte fell in love, then all of a sudden racism was completely erased from that world. Like, oh, those two people fell in love, so we all forget that we do not like black people. Like, I don't understand why and how Shonda Rhimes was able to explain that. By the way, she did not manage to explain because it just didn't make sense. The entire Grace experiment felt rushed. Like they were literally handing out titles of nobility at the wedding, like 2 seconds before she walked down the aisle. It was very badly explained, very rushed upon. It did not make sense. I'm still confused, as in season 1 when Lady Danbury mentioned this great experiment nonsense. It still doesn't make sense. So if any of you understood what that was for, please comment down below, because I would love to really catch on, because I'm still lost. Anyways, for me that was a minor. It was very confusing, it was very weird. If you want to make a show where it's colorblind, just make the show colorblind. We have seen it before with Cinderella, with Brandy, which is one of my favorite adaptations of Cinderella on the screen. I just feel like the fact that the entire cast was like colorblind was just amazing and just worked, and I don't know why they had to include race. Like, if you're gonna make it colorblind, just make it colorblind, and if you're gonna talk about race, then talk about race. Like, the fact that they're kind of trying to like do this in-between nonsense, it's not making sense. And can we talk about the fact that you have a bunch of white old people sitting in a room discussing the future of black people and essentially making the decision of giving them a false hope and idea of equality. Like, we'll give you a title but no land and no money. Let's set them free but no job, no education. Did you catch that? It's funny because the show is trying to not talk about race, but they are walking right into it. Like, how ironic.
It is a wonderful experiment. Long live the experiment.
As much as I felt bad for young Queen Charlotte because she was in way over her head and she was basically manipulated into this situation, I kind of couldn't feel bad for Queen in the present day. She was so unlikable. She came off as a very cruel mother. Prayers, sorrow. Obviously she had to deal with a lot with George, and maybe that made her cold and maybe to some extent cruel, and also she had the pressure of the public to produce an heir. But at some point there was an opportunity for character growth, and it just never happened. And there was this scene where her eldest son and her eldest daughter came to her to basically tell her that she has been trashed, and to just explain that they have been through a lot, like miscarriages, and they have all tried to like make her happy and to produce an heir. And she was like, oh really? Oh, I did not know. And that was it. Like, it was just like very shallow, and that opportunity for character development for Queen Charlotte just never happened. Speaking of her children, why do I feel like introducing her children now? 2 seasons into Bridgerton does not make any sense. Like, homegirl has like 12 or 15 children. I don't remember exactly how many, but she has a lot of children, and you're just introducing them in the 3rd season of Bridgerton. It's not even the 3rd season, but you're introducing them after season 1 and season 2 of Bridgerton. It just doesn't make sense. Like, where were they doing season 1 and season 2? Where were they? Tell me that this one would have run into Benedict in one of his art gallery and they would have not make some art together. Tell me that this one wouldn't fuck Benedict. Really, it's just not making any sense. Why didn't any of her kids show up in any of the balls that happened during season 1 and season 2? Why were the mamas trying to get on Simon's neck and Anthony's neck and not on one of her sons, the prince? Especially because there was no heir to the throne, so basically the first woman to give one of the prince's son an heir to the throne would have been set for life. Why weren't the mamas trying to marry one of the prince to their daughters? Why was the queen trying so hard in season 1 to get a nephew to marry Daphne, the diamond of the season, and not one of her son? She was fighting so hard in season 1 for a nephew to marry Daphne, but not her sons? Our unmarried sons? Weird. There was just so many inconsistency with what we have seen previously with the queen and what we're seeing in her story right now. Like, I get that they didn't think everything through, but they added stuff that were really unnecessary. Like, for example, she was the one that was so adamant in like, you need to be friends with your spouse. She was like, friendship must come before love, but then she just want to pick someone and force them to marry her sons. Didn't make sense. Also, the pacing. Oh, the pacing was terrible. That second episode with young Charlotte, and when George left her in that big ass palace, I think it was Buckingham Palace, I'm not sure, but left her in that palace all by herself, and they did this montage where you could see her get up, dress, eat again and again and again. Like, damn, like, I get that you want to show that she's bored and days have passed and George hasn't come back. Still, like, did we have to suffer through all that nonsense with her? The problem with pacing is that once you break pacing, then you have to like bring people back into the story, and it's a period drama. Like, I want to believe that this world exists, and once you break it with boring text, boring shit, you just lose me, and it just took me just a while to get back into it. And last but not least, where was the plot? The intrigue? The climax? It was giving nothing. They were literally just jumping from scene after scene after scene, but there was no tension, there was no stake in the entire story. When it comes to like the romance genre, a lot of writers for TV and even sometimes for books, they think that just because they're giving us some steamy scenes, they don't need to give us like a plot. There don't need to be any tension, like some internal or external threat to the main character, something like a stake. Like, we already knew from season 1 and 2 that George was suffering from a mental illness, so obviously when they introduced the fact that he had the secret, the audience already knew the secret. Like, we're literally watching Charlotte discover the big reveal, but for us, like for the audience, it's kind of like anticlimactic. And even the way in which they introduced the fact that George had the secret, it was not even in an interesting way. Like, basically she was seeing him do the same thing day after day, and she was just like, oh, what is going on? Like, she was just curious. Like, it wasn't like some big thing actually happened. Also, when she knew, it was not like she was gonna leave. Like, there wasn't any moment in time where the audience was like, oh, she's gonna leave him. No, we knew that she was in love. We knew that they were gonna end up together. So there was not any real threat to their relationship, not really any threat to George's coronation or George's crown. There were so many ways that the writer could have made the tension like go up a notch. Like, for example, Parliament threatened to expose George. At no point in time did I ever feel like that was gonna happen. There was no cousin that was trying to take up the throne. They were going from scene after scene after scene, and there was really not linking each scene together. Obviously, the show still ended up being good because they gave us some pretty spicy scenes, but if we actually look closely, like, the show was kind of like empty, and because it was so empty and there was no really any real plot and any real threat, I feel like it's really forgettable. They literally just had a ball and then they just cut to credits, and I was expecting like another episode, and I was like, oh, that's it, like, we're done. Now let's go into what I actually liked about the show. And I know what you're gonna say, did you really like anything about the show? Because you had a lot to say about it. To be fair, I really enjoyed the show, and let me tell you why. The supporting characters: Lady Danbury, Lady Violet, Brimsley, amazing. biggest strength of the show are the supporting characters by far. I would say I was really open to see Lady Sharma and a story about how she ran off with the priest to India, but I guess this happens later on and so it couldn't fit into the story. But anyway, supporting characters supported the show, no pun intended. The topics that they chose to explore through the supporting characters were really interesting and were actually new. So for example, with Lady Danbury and mainly Lady Violet, we were able to explore basically that older women also have, I don't know, like a libido. You're just not dry up just because you're past 30. I really like the fact that we don't really see that on screen and it's not really a topic that is often explored, especially in like period dramas. I love the way in which they presented it. It was really class and it was just an amazing thing to see. And I love the fact that they touched upon the fact that you can still move on even though you already met the love of your life. I just think that that was just like a beautiful storyline to add in. And then Lady Danbury. Oh my god, Lady Danbury, she stole the show. I know the show is called Queen Charlotte, but they should have called the show Lady Danbury because that girl came and ate, especially young Lady Danbury. Amazing, amazing. Like, I won't lie, that first scene with Lady Danbury's husband, that very first scene, for those who have watched the show, you know what I'm talking about. That first scene, I was about to fight someone. I was like, what the heck is this? Who is this man? Get him off of her. Ugh. At first I was like, Shonda Rhimes, you need to explain yourself because what the heck is this? But then as you go into the story, you can understand that it's done on purpose and obviously he dies. So sorry, not sorry, it was a relief. Because I was like, Shonda Rhimes, are you really trying the only dark-skinned black girl on your show like that? Is this what you're gonna leave her with? I was so pissed. But obviously, it's part of her story and it makes sense later on. But I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit on the fence with her husband. And then I was even more on the fence with a kind of fling with Lady Violet's father. I didn't see that coming. It was very cute, but at the same time, it was very weird. They were trying to justify adultery. And there's this thing that Shonda Rhimes often does in her story, especially when it concerns adultery, is that she tried to make the wife look crazy and bad to justify what they're doing. So in this case, she made Violet's mother look racist. She was kind of like this mini villain to justify the fact that her husband was sleeping with Lady Danbury, which is like, there's no justification for this. Like, it's wrong. I just feel like if you're gonna make them cheat, then just make them cheat.
I like you. Let's be friends.
I think the fuck not.
Anyways, I think that the story was cute. I'm glad it didn't last long. It was just a brief mistake, I would say, but it was still cute. At some point I was like, is Lady Danbury Lady Violet's stepmama? Like, what's going on? And then what I really loved about Lady Danbury is that there was a certain consistency with Lady Danbury's character. Like, you could clearly see how young Lady Danbury was gonna become older Lady Danbury. She was intelligent, she was a strategist, she was strong, she was witty, she was funny. Like, you could really see that, oh, you're gonna be the older Lady Danbury. I feel like that's something that was missing with Queen Charlotte, is that I couldn't really see how young Queen Charlotte became older Queen Charlotte, but I could clearly see how young Lady Danbury became older Lady Danbury. Like, Lady Danbury was just like, she just stole the show for me. And also, it makes sense in the future that her kids are not around her, because Lady Danbury in season 1 and season 2 of Bridgerton just looks like, she looks almost childless. Like, you don't really see her kids. I think she talked about her kids in season 1. Kind of makes sense now when you watch her background story, in the sense that, like, since that she didn't love her husband, because it just makes sense that obviously she's not really close with her kids, because her kids kind of reminds her of her husband, and obviously her kids kind of know that she doesn't really like them, so they won't really be around them. The reason why Lady Danbury stole the show is because she was one of the most consistent characters. Now, Brinsley and Reynolds, I was so here for the love story. It was so beautiful. A little bit sad because we really don't know what happened to Reynolds. The scene at the end where he's at the ball, where he's dancing all by himself, oh my god, I lost it. I was bawling. I was crying. I was like, where is Reynolds? What happened to him? I feel like they're kind of trying to prepare us for Benedict being gay, which I'm not here for. Like, I feel like Brimsley and Reynolds' relationship is like, it's cute. I don't mind there being like a Bridgerton series with a gay couple, but it can't be Benedict. It can't be my book, guys. It can't be my book. Benedict book with Sophie is my favorite book of all the Bridgerton show, and I'm not ready for Sophie to become Stephen. Like, it's not gonna be the same, especially because Sophie's story has a lot to do with the fact that she's a woman. If Sophie becomes a man, then it's gonna change so much. Yeah, I don't know, I'm not ready. Like, I don't think it's necessary. Anyways, if it happens, it happens. I'm gonna enjoy it either way because it's Benedict and I'm here for anything Benedict. But still, I'm gonna be so sad. Anyways, all in all, the show had pretty phenomenal supporting characters. It was really intelligent to have all these different supporting characters with their own background story and their own like message that we're going to trying to give, because it kind of erased the fact that the main couple weren't giving us anything. Now the moment that we were all waiting for, Queen Charlotte and King George's chemistry. Oh my god. Those smut scenes, those teamy scenes, it was giving Olivia and Fitzgerald Grant. That tension, that foreplay tension, that foreplay fight that they were doing, I wasn't really invested in the actor and the actress. Like when they announced the two of them, I was like, okay, whatever. But then they came with that and I was like, oh my god, that was hot. I was like, damn, get a room, what is going on? This is spicy. And that montage with them like hating each other, but it's just foreplay, because I was like, damn. It was very Shonda Rhimes. I feel like in most of her films she often uses fights and just like tension to create this, to build up this sex scenes. The scene where they were fighting and she was like, do you love me? It was really giving me some Olivia Pope and Fitzgerald Grant like flashbacks. It was giving me Scandal. Like, if you know, you know. If I honestly had to rate the Bridgerton Spice, it would definitely be season 1 with Daphne and Simon. I know a lot of people didn't like Daphne and Simon, but to be fair, there's no beating Reggae. Like, I'm not a particular fan of George. Like, it's not my type, but I can see why the girls like him. But Reggae Jampage is just Reggae is just Reggae. Like, ugh. The list is still gonna stay season 1, then Charlotte, and then Kate and Anthony, because just like they were giving us tension, but then at the end we got nothing. It was like, yes girl, give us nothing. One of the things that really changed my mind of the show and that really made it best Bridgerton show so far is the way they treated George's illness, and so the way that the show tackled mental health. I love the fact that it was so real. Like, it wasn't some whimsical, they didn't do this mistake they could have easily fall into by making it seem like Charlotte's love could save him. The show was able to portray in a realistic and brutal way the reality of somebody that was suffering terminal illness in that time, and especially that montage where you would see him basically getting tortured day after day after day because he's trying to get better. I feel like that was the scene. Like, honestly, I was bawling my ass. I was so sad. But it really made the entire experience look real. It's not something that could just go away. They weren't trying to force an happy ending on us, and they weren't trying to make it seem like she could just give him this magic kiss and all of a sudden it was gonna go away. And they were able to show that it wasn't gonna get better. There were gonna be consequences, and I think that just made the entire world seem real, because if there's no consequences and everything is just whimsical and it's just balls after balls after, and everything just end up working out, then what is the point? What would it make the story stand out from all the other Bridgerton stories was the fact that it wasn't a perfect ending, it wasn't a happy ending, it was more of a realistic ending. It was interesting to see that they didn't try to sugarcoat any situation in the same way that they kind of tried to sugarcoat Anthony, Kate and Edwina's situation, where at the end Edwina was fine with her sister being married to her ex-fiance. Like, that situation was just weird and just filmed like they were trying to sugarcoat a situation that couldn't have been easily salvaged. This situation, the showrunner really like stayed in this mess, in this difficult situation, and they make it work in a realistic way. And so for those reasons, the show just feels more real, just more authentic than the other Bridgerton show. Even though I wasn't happy with the way that they were introduced and the fact that they seemed very two-dimensional and there was really no substance to our kids, our children, I really like the way that they were presented. It was done purposely to show them in the way that she sees them. So what I mean by that is that from the very beginning, all our kids were presented in groups, like all together, kind of like you would see like a group of ships. And so because Charlotte kind of sees her children just like breeding machines or breeding like animals, it makes sense to always see them like in a group not really any identity, and just together. The showrunner were able to make the form, so what we're seeing, match the intention. So our kids are seen as just breathing machines. They only have one job, is to produce an air. We don't really care about who they are. She doesn't really care for them that much, and so they are always together in a group, not really distinctible. I don't know, despite all the inconsistency, the fact that the beginning was a little bit rushed and things that could have been smoothed out a little bit better, this season really stand out because it was real. I think the showrunners really took a risk, especially when we look at the topics. They took a risk, and I think they nailed it. I kind of feel like it's gonna be very hard to do better. We're gonna see what Colin and that snake, what is her name, Penelope, that's it, that girl, that crazy girl, has for us, but I feel like it's gonna be really hard for them to do better. Anyways, I'll give Queen Charlotte: A Bridgerton Story a solid 4 stars. I really enjoyed myself. I went into it expecting nothing, and I was pleasantly surprised. And that's it, guys. Thank you for staying to the end. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button. Tell me in the comments what you liked about the show. Would you like to see a season 2 of Queen Charlotte, or do you think that that's all we're getting for this season? Au revoir.